All right, hello once again, Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. I've been going through a series of video presentations for the Rankin Technical College Application and Web Development AWD1000 Web Development Technologies class. Our textbook is Murox, JavaScript, and jQuery 3rd edition, and we've gone over chapters 1 through 12 as a class. I've done lectures on chapters 13, 14, 15, and 16 outside of class, and the first half of Chapter 17. I'm now going into the second half of Chapter 17 and hope tomorrow to finish the book up by going through Chapter 18. I'm on page 518, and the author says here, talking about a factory function, as you just learned, you can use constructor functions to create multiple instances of an object. However, there's another way of doing this that some programmers prefer. All right. It says constructor functions in JavaScript let you create an object type and customize its prototype. They also provide a familiar syntax to programmers who work with classical, more object-oriented programming as opposed to object-based programming languages. However, as it says, JavaScript isn't a classical language, and some programmers wanted another way to create new objects. To address this, they added a create method to the object type. So if you look here, it's showing you how you can do this on the top of page 519. The table that you see up here shows the syntax of the associated create method. The first parameter is the prototype object you want to use for the new object. The second one, which is optional, are the properties that the new object should have. They're not going to use this in this chapter, all right? Since it's ES5 or ECMAScript 5, ECMA is the European Computer Manufacturers Association, kind of the W3C that oversees JavaScript, for lack of better words. All right, so this first example that you see here shows how to use the create method. The prototype of the object is used as the prototype for the new object. So it's the same as creating the new object with an object literal. Usually you'll use the create method with a custom prototype object, which is kind of the way they're showing it in here. And then there's another example in the figure down near the bottom here where they include what's called a factory function. A factory function is a function that creates, initializes, and returns objects. It's similar to a constructor that you can add properties to it, and you can initialize those properties with the values passed in. So, as the author mentions here on the bottom of the page, another way to create new objects is the create method. A factory function uses this create method to create new objects. It says you don't call the factory function with a new keyword. Some people like this, some people don't. All right, so they go back and they rewrite the trips thing, this time using a factory function. So how does it change? Not really extensively. So you can see what they've done here with the prototype and the create right here. A little bit more down on the bottom in our main JavaScript file. Now, as people sometimes ask, well, geez, Jeff, which one should we use? Yes, that's not meant to be a smart aleck. Read the chapter, look at them both. Use the one that makes the most sense to you. I always tell students, and again, I'm not sure if Mr. Gudmested agrees with this or not, but especially when you're in your first year, you transition in the first year from being a beginner to at least being a novice and becoming comfortable with things. But especially in your first semester, you should be programming for understandability on your part. So if you read this and you say, hey, this non-factory thing doesn't, it's much easier to not use the factory, then don't use it. If you say, no, it's much easier to use the factory, then use that. Okay? All right. Some advanced skills for working with objects. One thing is, and they mention this on the bottom of page 523, in JavaScript, all functions are objects. All of the arguments passed to a function are stored in the arguments property of a function object. You'll notice here, all right, if you call this and you pass 6, you take that 6, modulo it by 2, all right, and it would return true because it is equal to 0. In other words, there is no remainder. The arguments property is similar to an array in that you can use an index to access the elements, but it's not a true array, meaning you can't use the array elements like push and pop, shift and unshift, etc. that we've talked about earlier. If a function uses the arguments property to get the arguments passed to it, the calling statement can pass more or fewer arguments than the list specifies. Cascading methods, shown on pages 524 and 525. A cascading method is an object method that can be chained with other methods. We've talked chaining before. Something dot something dot something type of an idea. A method must return the object represented by the this keyword if it's going to be chained to other methods. All right. Next, on 526 and 527, they talk about how to inherit methods from another object. Okay? When you talk about a true object-oriented programming language, not JavaScript, but a C# or a Java, some of the hallmarks include inheritance, where I can have, inheritance in software is like, it's not identical, but it's like inheritance, genetic inheritance. Typically, if you have husband A with big nose who marries wife B with big nose and they have child C, probably there's a pretty good chance that child will have a big nose. Doesn't always happen, but it usually does. That's genetic inheritance. So what can that child do about it? A, live with a big nose. B, get a nose job. It's not like they can take off their nose and put another one on. But you can do that with software inheritance. So you can inherit something and you can make changes to it. So inheritance allows you to share base functionality among different objects. To inherit the methods of an object, you set the prototype object of the child to an instance of the parent. They're showing you an example of it right there. To inherit methods of the object method, pass the parent object as the prototype. All right? This is very conceptual in nature. I would say that if you're looking at this and you're going, yeah, maybe I should read it. Yeah, maybe you should. All right. Next is the this keyword, which we've talked about. It's how to use the this keyword. All functions have a this keyword. The value of that keyword depends on how the function is invoked. All functions also have three methods that allow you to specify the value of this. There's a call method and an apply method, which you can see up here, where call lets you specify the value of the this at the time you invoke it. Apply lets you specify the value of this at the time you invoke it. Notice that parameters other than this are coded individually for call, and they're coded as an array with apply. Other than that, they're very similar. Finally, there is a bind method, and that bind method can be used to assign a method of an object to an event handler. So the chapter pretty much ends with going back to this task list application that we had created in an earlier chapter, and it goes back and it rewrites it in basically an object-based way. So the application uses jQuery and the jQuery UI libraries for some of the custom functionality. So notice in here, we've got multiple library files. Task, storage, task list. All right, we also have the jQuery, and we have the jQuery UI, and then our own function. So for the task and the storage libraries shown on 532 and 533, the library underscore task.js file, it's the one for working with individual tasks. All right. The library storage or library underscore storage.js file is the library that gets tasks in and out of web storage. And it contains two factory functions. Get local storage, which contains the general methods get, set, and clear, and the get task storage, which inherits the methods get local storage factory function. Then it uses that as a start and does its overriding. The main JavaScript file is shown on page 537 and discussed here on page 536. And as the author mentions, there's a ready function here. We already know what the document.ready function is. But what it does in here is it adds click event handlers for the add task and the clear task buttons. Why? Because way back on page 531, and I can move back to it, we've got an add task and a clear task button. We've got two buttons, one for each one. So it chains two methods of the task object, and the click event handler for the add task button creates a new task object. So it is doing what we have done previously, but it is doing it in an object-oriented way. And that's pretty much it for the chapter. So, quite a few things in the summary on this page and the next. JavaScript provides a two-level hierarchy of native object types. At the top is the object. Everything below it, number, Boolean, etc., all those, they're all children of object. There's also a function in there. You create your own objects by coding an object literal with properties and methods. A property is just a variable that you've declared inside of an object. A method is just a function that you declare inside of an object. Once an object is created, you can add new properties and methods to it. You can change the value of existing properties and methods, and or you can delete existing properties and methods. Remember that a variable holds a reference to an object, not the object itself. All right? You can use a constructor to create your own object types. You can add methods to the object type's prototype object. When a constructor is called with a new keyword, an instance of that object type is created. You can use the create method of the object to create a new object that's passed in. In JavaScript, important point here again on the bottom of page 538, all functions are objects, and all the arguments passed to a function are stored in the arguments property of the function object. Top of page 539, cascading methods are created by returning the this keyword, which creates methods that can be chained. This is also known as fluent coding. You can inherit the methods of another object by passing its prototype to the object create method. All functions have a this keyword, but its value depends on how the function is invoked. You can use the bind method of a function to set the value of this when a function is coded or assigned. And finally, you can use the call and apply methods of a function to set the value of this when the object is invoked. That's it for this chapter. When I come back again tomorrow morning, I will be going over the last chapter of the text. That is right here, Chapter 18, how to create and use closures, IIFEs, the module pattern, and plugins. So I will be back with that lecture tomorrow.